A lot of familiar faces in our participants, but for some new names as well, welcome. Thank you for being a part of the session today. For those of you who maybe don't know, what is Martechify? Dasha, if you want to scoot to the next slide.
All right. And I did hit record, so I'll be recording this session. So
excellent. So Martechify, the vision of Martechify is really a community of marketers. Everybody on this call is dealing with what it takes to do modern marketing these days. So we wanted to put together a forum series and some great discussions that build on each other and are really relevant to the kind of work that we're all doing. So it's led to some really great sessions. I think this is our 13th session. If you want to catch up on the others, if you've not seen the other ones before, we recently launched a new Martechify website that has recordings of our previous sessions, more information, and also resources dealing with these kinds of issues. So I'm Kyle Herbst. Martechify is sponsored by the Ascend marketing team. So if you see our little backgrounds, have any questions, technical difficulties, feel free to reach out to us directly. But obviously, this is bigger than Ascend. We've got some experts from some fantastic companies dealing with the big challenges and conquering them. So we've got a really exciting trajectory plan, not only for today, but for future sessions. So go ahead and check that out. I'm really excited for the session today. So I'll kick it over to Rich to get us started and introduce Darren, Ali, and Sujoy this morning. Thank you.
Oh.
All righty, good morning, everybody. And I'm Rich Herbst. I head Ascend Marketing, and at least as of late, I've been the main moderator for Martechify. And I'd like to welcome our experts. Today we have Darren Atkins, who's dialed in from England. So thank you for joining us this afternoon, Darren. Glad to have you here. Darren's a marketing director from Sabre Corporation. And I think of Darren as a deep expert in demand generation and very integrative marketing. Ali Arestiello has been a friend for multiple years now, and we see her speaking at multiple events around the area. She's VP now of Marketing and Sales Operations at Health Catalyst, a healthcare-oriented data firm. She may describe that a little more. But we also know her from previous work at Cornerstone On Demand. She knows how to build, lead, and drive Martech and marketing ops organizations. So I think we're expecting fantastic insights from her. And then Sujoy Chandra, deep expert, a strategy guy, data, marketing, general, and marketing technology. So Sujoy is a senior marketing leader at SiriusXM, and each of our experts may tell us a little more about their backgrounds as we get into the session further. Part of our agenda today is to have each of them share around some of their own experience. But what we'll do right now is kick off into some warm-up kind of conversation to get all our brains moving this morning. And why don't we move ahead a slide, just to get us rolling here. Our last session was in February, and that session was part two, focused on a two-part series focused on customer data platforms, CDPs. So we went pretty deep on how to implement and what to expect when moving into a CDP deployment. Today we're shifting to an organizational slant. Our theme is how to build an A-grade marketing team. And our content today will start with a framing discussion. We'll get our experts involved in some dialogue. In the middle section, we'll have each of them share out of their own experience. And then in the latter part of our discussion, we'll attempt to connect the dots and determine the so what's around building A-grade marketing teams. At the end, we'll share a little more about what's coming up in Martechify. Let's move ahead a slide. So, opening thought, building an A-grade marketing team. So what's so hard about that? And I kind of say that and I chuckle under my breath because these days I think of building A-grade marketing teams as quite the challenge. Yeah, I'd like to just kind of open up the conversation here, experts, and hear your thoughts about what's challenging. By the way, everybody, we have the chat channel open. If you haven't done it already, please open the window in WebEx, lower right, so that you can see the chat. there's going to be a very active chat dialogue going on while the experts are sharing their insights. Toward the end of the session, we'll open up the microphones, bring in more points from the chat channel, and put it all together. But so experts, so what's so hard about building an A-grade marketing team? Any initial reactions?
Jump in, Victor. One problem facing me at the moment is actually recruiting. From the perspective, obviously, within a Martech team, there's lots of different disciplines. The role I'm trying to recruit for is kind of a head of marketing ops. The problem with marketing ops, as we know, is it's still quite specialized. It's still quite a new discipline. And then when you dig into that discipline, there's also the specialisms within that. So we're running a map platform that is Pardot. Do I limit my recruitment to just a Pardot expert, or do I open that up to people who've got experience across different platforms who could probably pick up on Pardot quite quickly? But so that's a question. One of the questions I'm certainly facing at the moment is the recruitment question, because it is still quite a specialized and niche discipline.
For me, it's resourcing in general. Recruiting is part of that, but fighting for headcount, fighting for budget for tools, fighting for, the things that aren't just the new shiny woo-woo that everybody wants, but really are going to drive the needle and make change. And what I find, because I've, come into a lot of organizations where operations just wasn't, very mature yet. They've bought a lot of tools that don't make any sense, that, they aren't ready to use, they've been abandoned. They don't have the foundations in place to really, do the things that they need to do from a growth perspective. And so, outlining that, the education, and then the fighting for resources, that's basically the first year of walking into a team, right? A lot of times they don't even have the right headcount in place.
Great stuff. Let's actually roll ahead a slide, Dasha. Maybe we can collect some points as we go here. So I'm hearing recruiting as a first one. I'm hearing kind of equipping the team. I think I heard you say, Darren, the specialized skills needed across the various platforms and then beyond the platforms. Allie, I hear you saying going to bat to get the head count, the resourcing you need. I think you mentioned more dimensions of going to bat. What additional thoughts?
I think it's a great question, Rich, and thanks for organizing this conversation today. I think finding good people has always been a challenge, no matter what. But if you look at how marketing has evolved over the years, it's become a lot more tech-focused and tech-driven. And I think now you have to find people that are not just the creative side, but also those folks that embrace the technology. So if you think about SEO, 10 years ago, SEO was pretty simple, I would say. You had to understand your audience, you used a few tools. Fast forward to today, SEO is almost a huge part of it is driven by AI and other sort of more advanced technologies. And that makes it more difficult for you to hire an SEO team. So I think the evolution of technology and how it's become embedded in marketing is a huge part of this. And I think Darren sort of touched on it with his specialized skills. But I think the next 5 years is going to see an even more sort of tsunami of technology and more natural language processing and all of the buzzwords you can think of. So how do you prepare for that is going to be pretty interesting.
I think that just to jump into what both of you guys have said as well, is that bit of the tech space is just expanding. I can't even, I'm sure we've all seen those charts. It shows how much marketing tech there now is available, and it just expands every single year. And to your point, Ali, of what's the right tool and why are you purchasing that tool? And then even how do you get the most out of it? Often I've seen where you think it's the right tool, but still getting up to speed, getting your team trained, getting the most value out of that tool is still another challenge in itself.
Yeah, for sure.
Fabulous.
You really need to understand the maturity level of the team before you go buying tools in general. not just of your operations team, but of your marketing team. Are they sophisticated enough yet to be able to do really thoughtful ABM, for example, before you go spend money on 6 cents?
Yeah, I'm hearing a great insight from all three of you guys around not only how do you get the skills and equip the team to use a particular technology or technologies, but I'm hearing a broader point around marketing is changing, and you know, the need for marketers who can not only think creatively, but can think in terms of message or think in terms of targeting, but can think in terms of how to do that with the tech. Fabulous points, and I think we see that in our work as a challenge many organizations are dealing with. Let's roll ahead a slide. I'd like to kind of peel the onion a step and go one level deeper into various dimensions of our topic here. So that's kind of, I think I've got 6 of these lined up, but first one is organizing. What's challenging about organizing an A-grade marketing, Martech or marketing ops team?
I think the biggest challenge is making sure you can cover all the disciplines within marketing, or within marketing operations, I should say. So, I find that marketing operations spans so much more than just the technology. It is the people too, and the processes that you build around it. It is the analytics behind it and the insights you're finding. And so really, making a case for not just a team that handles your marketing automation platform, but a team that manages your full marketing stack, your budgets, your processes, your analytics. That's a much bigger team than most people or most companies are willing to think that operations is. And they expect these tiny little teams to be able to do all of these things, not realizing, the specialization in what that, their skill sets need to be. But also that these superpower teams, which are, really strong, still can't handle all of that.
Yeah, definitely concept with that. And I think I was going to say the same point that I'll touch on, I think, in a slide later. One of the key questions for me is having absolute clarity about what is it that marketing is here to do. That tends to change in every organization, or at least the interpretation of what marketing is here to do changes. And without having that clear kind of North Star of what is it you're trying to achieve and where do your priorities lie, you can get pulled in every kind of direction, jumping from kind of the latest hot thing to the next hot thing, without having real clarity of where are you today and where are you trying to get to. That's what drives kind of the organization of the team for me.
Yeah, I think business models are evolving so quickly. We're all hearing about, Web3 and crypto and how we want to use blockchain for everything. So I think maybe one step above the organizing aspect is just to understand which way is the business headed. We perhaps are in different cycles depending on your industry. If you're in a fast cycle industry, your world is changing every 6 months. In other industries, maybe every 6 years. But change is coming. So making sure that your technology is ultimately focused on driving value for your organization is perhaps the North Star. So that's the challenging part. How do you make sure that you're not getting ahead of yourself? I think, like Darren mentioned, just chasing the next shiny big thing. But also, how do you make sure that you are not impeding progress for your company? So it's an interesting challenge.
We also have a good point in the chat that we have a lot of organizations who have an employee base that they're available, but they need upskilling. So that in of itself is a challenge.
Big time. I address that in my presentation later.
Yeah. Good deal. I'm going to move us along here, guys. Great discussion so far. I think we already heard some points around staffing and resourcing, so I'll just do a short recap and we'll move on to the next slide. I think staffing and resourcing, we heard about hiring. We heard about hiring around particular skills and platform skills needed. And I think we also heard some points around equipping the team. Let's skip ahead to the next slide, Dasha. We'll keep peeling onions here. Equipping, onboarding. What's hard on that front? Where are the challenges on that front? And let's also talk about career pathing as well. We can kind of combine these two together in the conversation.
Yeah, I think for equipping and onboarding, the hardest thing is finding the time to make sure that all of your processes are documented and living and breathing areas, right? So a place that it's easy to find, that you can point teams to be like, hey, to start your onboarding, read through our SOP, or here's some videos that we've taken to help educate the marketing team. Maybe you should peruse those, like whatever your documentation style is and your training style is, having that ready to go. I think that's so hard to do with the day-to-day work that is, ever present for these teams.
Yeah, that again, agree with that. And to the point in the chat as well about how do you upskill teams, which is an ongoing challenge. So the onboarding bit is obviously the start of that, and you're getting new people in. And exactly to Ali's point, you can, or I have seen happen, try not to start from scratch every time. If you can define what an onboarding process looks like and create those training videos once and have them repeatable, saves the team a whole load of time. Jumping ahead, just one quick point in terms of career pathing, it is a constant challenge to get up to speed. I think even for myself, trying to stay on top of what's new and what's available and what's still relevant in the market is an ongoing challenge. And the only thought I have on that is trying to make sure your team feel empowered enough to carve out their time to do their own keeping up to date training, make sure they feel empowered to be able to do that. That's a key part of their role. No one's going to keep up to speed easily. It's an ongoing key part of every marketer, I think. And so making sure the teams have got enough time and feel empowered enough to take that time to keep up to speed, I think is a key point.
Great
point. I would also say that from a career pathing standpoint, understanding where someone's passion lies and like which technologies they really love, they can go and own those on the team. I tend to have a team that we all have shared responsibilities, and then everybody on the team owns one or two tools that are theirs to own, and making sure that it's something that speaks to them. Also understanding if somebody wants to go into management versus just wants to be an IC that executes, but maybe at a really high level, because you can, career path that up. Most companies will allow you to have principals or even VPs with no direct reports. So making sure that you have those kinds of paths for everyone so they feel like they're getting more out of what they're doing is really important.
Super good. And I'll just add just a touch of spice to this one, which is the fact that it's a moving target. The processes evolve continuously, the tech evolves continuously, the methods evolve continuously. So, oh my goodness, not easy. Why don't we roll ahead?
We've seen a lot of benefit of using videos. So getting folks to share their knowledge and expertise using video, and it's all the rage nowadays. But we've had a lot of benefit of really getting a lot of engagement on both sides. The person who's sharing and the folks that want to learn using videos. So it's good to see that other folks are also finding that useful.
Super good. Let's go ahead and slide. So we have a team. We've done some hiring. We've done some onboarding and equipping. The team's in place. Now, how do you take it to A grade? The difference between having a team that functions versus taking it to full A grade. Let's talk about that. And also, let's kind of roll in. I'll leave this fairly open for the experts. The team sustainment and retention. Once you get that kind of team, how do you make sure it sustains? Challenges here. What do you see?
my number one way that I maintain my teams is I am transparent, and I try to be as transparent as possible. I jokingly say a lot of times I hate the word boss. We're a team, you know, diving in and solving problems together. I also make sure that there's, you know, paths for them to move forward, that we are paying people the right amount of money, that we are always looking to reward someone, especially in the ops teams, for going that extra mile when, you know, something's broken or something goes awry and they have to drop everything and go solve a problem. Really making sure that those teams are rewarded and feel validated and heard when they're frustrated. Those are my go-tos for sustaining a team.
All right.
I think
Any other thoughts
Gary,
on
you
these
might be
fronts?
muted.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was on
Go ahead,
mute.
Sujo.
Sujo, sorry, go after you.
I guess I was going to share that what's really worked for me is to make sure the team has autonomy. So we all crave the need to be sort of in charge of our own destiny. So making sure that no one feels like they're simply, you know, trying to follow someone else's vision and path. So that's the first thing. And the second one is just making sure that everyone understands the impact of their work. I think that's been proven to be an important part of employee engagement. So these two things, and I'm sure there are others, like Ali mentioned, being transparent, keeping an open environment. But these two things, autonomy and seeing the impact of your work, have proven to be really valuable. Yeah.
So the risk of repeating myself over and over, I think for me, for achieving A grade and also for the sustainment and retention, is the idea of make sure the team understand the vision and the purpose. Where are we trying to get to? What is our role? Make sure everyone understands what marketing's role is, and ideally how we measure that success. And from my perspective, the closer we can get to measuring success in terms of revenue, helps everyone feel motivated in terms of they're really aligned with what the business is here to do. So that's always a key focus for me, of focusing on the measurements, and then as you do hit targets quarter on quarter, that you celebrate success of that. I think to Sujo's point, that helps them understand the impact of their work, and that helps keep motivation pretty high.
Yep. And I also think that the A grade part comes from developing repeatable processes that make their jobs easier, so that they're not having to reinvent the wheel every time someone comes in with an ask, right? The more you can refine what they're doing and how they're doing it, so that there's more room for like bigger thinking, or doing more strategic things, and getting the like, let's get a campaign out the door, day-to-day type stuff out of the way. I think that's where you get that A grade from.
Super good. Yeah, I hear a lot of multiple points together aligning around a broader theme of culture building. You know, having a vibrant culture, especially when the work is stressful and constantly on the move, is just vital. And I think I hear that in all you guys' comments.
Yeah,
you know, as well as that's repeatable processes that maybe just add you know, repeatable processes that kind of get the frustration, you know, kind of frustration prevention might be another theme to call out here, because the work can get frustrating, and you know, having good, healthy processes, good culture, boy, I think helps a ton.
And I think
Sorry,
culture,
Ali, it looked like you were about to say something.
Yeah, I was just gonna touch on culture building is a little bit hard right now, because we're switching to remote work, right? And I find that as I lead remote teams, and I've been doing that now for even before the pandemic, it's just a little bit harder when you can't get together in person to do that, because as Nikki, who's on this call, can attest, when we all sat in the same row, I'd walk in every day and be like, hello, favorite team, and we'd start the day this way. And like, that just kind of brought a level of like I don't know, levity, I guess, maybe, to the stressfulness of what we were doing. And, you know, throughout the day, you know, we would order coffees or, you know, whatever little thing that we could do to just sort of like alleviate the stress of the teams. But you can't really do that when you're remote. I mean, you can do it on Slack. I don't think it has the same effect, but you know, you can try.
Right.
So I think that's one of the challenges that we have today, really, in building these teams.
Very great. Thank you, guys. Super good points. Well, as we promised, we wanted to have a section for each of the experts to share out of their work and life experience. And so let's kind of shift into that here. I think we have Darren leading off this morning. So Darren, yeah, feel free to jump in here.
Great, thanks, Rich. So yeah, if you think about, for me, the considerations about when you're trying to build a Martech team, where do you start? I've captured a few areas here. These are obviously not exhaustive, but for me, answer or cover some of the key questions to ask and think about. So firstly, how complex is the organization? How many different segments do we serve? What different channels do we sell through? Is the organization highly centralized, or is it country or region focused? And even how well regarded is marketing in terms of the approach to demand gen? Is there an open door with sales? Is sales working in collaboration with marketing, or is that still an area of work that needs to be improved? How is the relationship with IT in terms of getting new tech on board? How much influencing needs to happen? So that's kind of one key question. The other one is to look at what's current skill sets sit within the organization. We've just touched on a little bit of this. But also, where does that skill sit? Is that within the central or core team that you manage, or are the skills more widely dispersed? And I'll come on to an example of that shortly. Also, can marketing leverage some of the capabilities that might exist elsewhere in the business, maybe areas of expertise such as business intelligence or analysis or analytics? Does that sit in other departments, or do you need to be self-reliant? Do you need that expertise in-house, or do you need to outsource it? And then what resources are actually available to build the team? How much capacity do you have to recruit internally, or are you having to rely on external agency support? And what are you asking that agency to do? Is it more executional, or are you looking for their help in defining and advising on the strategy? If you could just click on the slide a sec, thanks. But I think for me, the most critical point before you get into that, and I've touched on it a couple of times already, is having a clear view of the strategy and the vision. So what does the business actually expect from marketing today? What are they expecting? How are they going to measure success? Is marketing's role as a demand engine widely understood? I've been in numerous roles where I've kind of had to carve that out, gone into companies where it's still more of a traditional model for marketing with a heavy focus on events, not much focus on digital, for example. So what is the expectation today, and what capability do you want to drive for tomorrow? What's your ambition for tomorrow, and how are you going to get there? That's kind of where I think we need to start, by answering the questions to define a real clear roadmap for success. From how do you get from A to B, then look at the complexity, the skill sets, the insourcing and outsourcing to build out your roadmap for how you're going to build that team. Can you just move on a slide, Steve? So this is just an example of that where I've worked once before. So this is a simple marketing org chart, and the difference really here was that I was going into an organization where it was a brand new structure for marketing that had the idea of building a single sales and marketing excellence team to deliver across EMEA, and transform, as I was saying as an example, from what was largely a traditional approach to marketing into a highly effective demand gen engine, where we could demonstrate marketing's impact on driving revenue. And we got pretty much a short window to prove the validity of this approach. So we need to get off the ground pretty quickly. And hence that was a decision taken, if you just click into the slide, to quickly add a layer of expertise from an agency. there's no way we were going to be able to recruit all of the expertise and onboard and upskill people in the short time we had available. So the decision we made was to outsource this to a specialist demand gen agency, and that this agency would then be the conduit between the centralized marketing function and the in-country campaign managers who were effectively executing on the campaigns. Just click on a slide. Now, obviously the challenge with that was, whilst that got us off the ground pretty quickly, it wasn't really sustainable ongoing due to the high level of cost of working with that many people outsourced to an agency. So how we overcome that was to introduce a demand gen academy. So this was a whole piece around training and onboarding and upskilling all of the local country managers and country activation teams. So whilst we were activating with the agency, at the same time in parallel, we were putting in place a whole this whole academy to train people up, give them the ability to actually self-skill and upskill. And that allowed us to pare back the reliance on the agency, and then we focused on what we thought were 3 key roles to have in-house. One was a dedicated paid specialist, because we're running quite a high level of number of campaigns, and to outsource that would remain quite costly. We introduced a new map specialist, would be the key conduit between those country activation teams to continue advising and applying best practice, and giving them any support and help that they required. And then we had a dedicated role for analysis and optimization. If you just click on one more slide, please. The other key point to note about this structure, which was, I think, quite transformational, this was probably the most effective, not probably was the most effective demand gen structure and organization I've worked in, was one, the really strong alignment between sales and marketing. So rather than in most of the organizations I've had where there is a sales structure reporting all the way up in the organization and a separate marketing structure, there was one combined VP of sales and marketing excellence whose responsibility was to make sure this was really holistic in terms of approach, and we were highly aligned and we were reporting to the same metrics. That was quite transformational in terms of really being able to prove marketing's impact on revenue, which, as I said, was the key objective initially. And the other one was having the inclusion of a dedicated business intelligence function. So having day-to-day access to data analytic experts able to use BI platforms to analyze all of the sales and the marketing data and any other data across the organization was really key in terms of being able to correlate that marketing performance with business revenues. So I think that was just an example of how we moved from quickly as a quick startup organization using agency support, paring back that support to focus on some key roles with the support of ongoing training, and then having that structural alignment and the support of business intelligence functions.
Hey, Darren, we have a comment in the chat and a question. Do you ever use your strategic partnerships and third-party agencies to help train your existing staff?
Yes. So in this particular example, obviously we actually, a large part of that training and the academy idea was built out from the agency itself. So we actually enlisted the agency to build out a whole series of training videos and training content, and building in some kind of, there was a small element of sort of gamification within that as well. So people were kind of incentivized to keep working through different modules and to upskill. We have done similar things in terms of doing that in-house, but yeah, on this particular occasion, it was outsourced mainly from the matter of a low starting point and the speed that was required. So yeah, so I just covered on that. There was a final slide, but sorry, that wasn't a summary. I completely forgot. I've got a summary slide in there as well, but I think I've just covered that anyway, so you can skip on.
No problem.
Cool.
Very good, Darren. It was great, interesting to hear the evolution of your team. Is your organization continuing to evolve, or is it kind of stabilized and good for the duration now?
So that was in a previous company, Rich. So that was back a number of years ago. I'm still, in honesty, the role I'm in now is still a ongoing education piece of across the organization, really, about what demand gen can do and trying to implement best practice. It's slightly more mature than it was in that previous company, but there's still a high degree of work to do. And as we touched on earlier, I think the idea of education and learning never kind of ends. I think that's just a constant challenge.
Yeah, great stuff. Well, thank you very much. Great points. Ali, Sujoy, any thoughts on what we've talked about so far?
Oh yeah, I mean that structure is very similar to what I'm going to talk about. Just a little bit. I did use an agency to help further the team. So you know, agencies are great partners. Just making sure you find the right one to do what you need. That's the most critical path, I think, and when you go down that route. And we'll talk about that a little bit in my presentation too. So can we go to the next slide?
Yeah, let's go ahead. All right, take
Awesome.
it away, Ali.
So basically, I presented this as like I had a challenge and how I solved it. So my very first leadership role was at a company called Rackspace, and I was there for 3 years and then was promoted into a role or into a management role. And I was there doing demand gen. I did customer marketing. I did have a little bit of an ops background because I worked at a small company and did everything there, including bringing on, you know, a marketing automation platform for the first time. So I had some sort of ops chops or just a tendency to really like the technology. And one of the biggest pain points we had there was that we didn't have our marketing automation platform was a mess. They had basically, you know, installed it or brought it on, and they let everybody and their mom have a login and send campaigns. It was insanity. And when I got there, I was like, this is really how we're operating? This is weird. But eventually they started to centralize a marketing ops team and needed someone with more expertise to come in and handle the automation piece. They said, you know, you can have any role you want. We have several leadership opportunities. What do you want to lead? And I was like, I want to go fix that marketing automation tool because it is a nightmare and really hard for us as the demand gen team to do anything. So as soon as I stepped into the role, the 2 people that were running the tool left. And then, yes, we only had 2 people, and there was like 200 marketers they were supporting, which was also not sustainable. So basically, I'm a new manager with no team, having to deal with, you know, the day-to-day, everyday things. I would have like 10 people deep standing at my desk just waiting to talk to me. There was a slight ticketing system in place, which I don't even think, I think it was just like send an email and it like put it onto a Jira log somewhere. And it was like 200 tickets deep that nobody had looked at. I mean, it was crazy. Next slide. So the first thing I did was hire an agency because there was no way that I could keep the wheels on the bus and then figure out, you know, how do I staff? What's the next step, right? So I found an agency that could act as an extension to my team, not just come in and consult. I needed them to execute for me. I actually had an FTE basically that would come into the office and act like a contractor, but they were coming from a Martech agency. And then I had like a whole team there that was dedicated to us. This was not cheap, by the way. This was incredibly expensive, but it got us through the year. The one thing I would say is when you're looking for this agency, make sure they have a deep understanding of your tech stack. Don't hire a Pardot agency if you have Marketo, because there's no way that they're going to be able to really hone in onto the things that Marketo can do to make it, you know, amazing, right? And vice versa, if they're a Marketo expert, don't try to get them to come in and do Pardot work, because they'll get real frustrated. So just make sure that that agency has the expertise in your full stack, Salesforce, everything that you're using in terms of technology. Next slide. The second thing I did was I established a real process, and one that was transparent, because the biggest complaint that we were having was that, people requests were going into a black hole. We don't know where we are on this. Who's working on what? How does this even work? So, I went and tried to figure out like what's the easiest way to do this without having to introduce a new tool, because we all know that I didn't have any staff. So how would I introduce another tool? So we had Jira in place across the company. So I just used Jira to create an intake process. And it gave that level of transparency that people needed to understand, like, okay, I had put a request in, I can go back and look at my request. I can see what status it's in. I can see if there's comments on it. And it was easy to train up because other teams were already using it. So my tips are just make sure that the tool is simple so that adoption is high. We kept the intake process super easy. Like it obviously gave the name of the person, but like a summary of what you need. Here are the things that where's your list, prompts to really get them to understand what they needed to give us to execute. I use something that already exists. And then document it. I mean, that's the biggest thing, right? Document it so that when new people come into the organization, that it's very easy for them to figure out, how do I get an email campaign out the door? How do I get reporting? How do I get whatever I need? Next slide. Then you got to hire a kick-ass team. So I had to hustle because I didn't have any resources at this point. So I went and looked internally, because internal people don't have to get to know your organization. They already know it. They're already in place. You just need to move them onto your team and get them trained up. The biggest thing that I did, and the best thing that I did, was that I started hiring the BDRs and SDRs as onto my team. And so if you are unaware of what a BDR and SDR is, that's your lead qualification team. It's the team that, gets the marketing source leads or past leads over, that is qualifying, setting meetings up for the sales reps to be able to go and do their sales magic. It's usually an entry-level job. It's definitely not typically like, that's my life stream, is to be an SDR. Like, that's just not one of those career paths that people tend to make. Every once in a while you find one. It's not normal though, right? So they're always looking for what's the next step. A lot of them move into sales, but a lot of them are not really interested in sales after doing that job. And so I would find the ones that wanted to get into marketing, and I would bring them onto my team. This picture, every single person on my team was from an internal team. One of them was a marketing program manager that wanted to be more on the tech side and the ops side. The other three were all SDRs. And I also had hired a couple of sales ops people too that wanted to get into marketing at one point. So really, just grabbing internal people. And then I had my agency train them deeply on Marketo and really like get down and dirty and nitty gritty, while I was doing the bigger things, right? Like figuring out, how do we clean up a Marketo instance? Where do I get, devs to do like an intermediate, we had to unplug it from Salesforce. It was a whole big project we were working on. So I was like working on these big things while they were running the day-to-day campaign work. And the agency was training them. Next slide. So once they are trained, I teach them to be a consultant to the business. They are not order takers. And I think that is the biggest thing that marketing ops teams need to remember, or any ops team really. Like, they are there to enable and to support, but they are there as the experts. I think that one of the biggest challenges for these teams are knowing that not all marketers speak the tech language. So they may come to you and ask you for something that seems crazy, or doesn't seem to make sense, or they're not using the right words. And it's up to us to decipher what they're trying to like what their end goal is, and then to show them how we would execute that end goal for them and really help educate them along the way. So once we got past the, you're not an order taker, you are this, consultant, it really changes the game of the team and how the rest of the organization looks at the team. They become a part of the strategy sessions. They become part of the day-to-day, the beginning process, and they're not just getting kicked over, send this email campaign, go measure this, whatever that end of the caboose thing that ops tends to get, right? So, my pro tips in doing that are to be very transparent with everyone. Like I said earlier, I let them vent their frustrations in a healthy manner. And by healthy, I mean that it's open door policy. You don't have to hold back your feelings, your emotions, your choice of words. You can be as real as you and raw as you need to be with me. So that once we get out of that safe space and you're, dealing with whoever is making you angry that day or frustrating you, you have you've already released all of that and you can go have a healthy conversation with them. I also always promote a good work-life balance, even before I worked for companies that had, these teams like that, that are these, rules around PTO, unlimited PTO and things like that. I always said, Fridays are days that we knock off early, or you go do something fun in the afternoon, or go to a bar and do some sort of team bonding, whatever it is. Fridays were their day to come in and do a little bit of work in the morning, but then knock off early and go have fun. If anybody needed off, I didn't care. I never paid attention to whatever the PTO policy was, just go take off. Those are all the things that, to me really help build a team. And then I also give them the room for growth. Anytime they want to go to a conference, anytime they wanted to watch a webinar, we would do lunch and learns and all sit in a conference room and watch a webinar together and comment on what we're seeing. So things like that were really important to really keep them happy and engaged. Next slide. And then the results of all of that were that we had a highly awarded and valued team. All of us within the first year were promoted in some regard. We all got substantial raises. I received constant praise for them. They were always brought in ahead of time to ask their opinions on things before people started executing or making promises across the board to sales or other teams. And so some of the, the results, we have an owner of a marketing consulting firm now. He is now got his own firm. And I still talk to him every day. Talked to him this morning. I have a director of demand marketing who actually just accepted an insane job with AWS, crazy job. As senior manager of marketing technology, he's actually still with Rackspace. One of them went off and started their own gym franchise. She was like, I don't even want to do this anymore. I'm going to go open my own business. And she actually texted me 3 weeks ago and wanted to know if I was okay because she had a dream about me. And she was like, I just need to know that you're okay. And then a director of marketing ops. So we, across the board, I've rehired people that worked for me at previous companies. I keep in touch with them. And I think that that's really the key to being able to recruit, being able to have teams that are highly regarded, and keeping people happy.
All right. Well, thank you, Allie. I'm struck. I love the storytelling and the picture you're painting around building and kind of igniting a team. A thing that stands out for me is, I sense that you're hiring for kind of raw horsepower. You're hiring for high potential people, but I hear a pretty big investment in training, onboarding, equipping, acculturating.
I do.
Yeah, sounds like you're taking that on. You're leaning that way rather than hiring people who already know all this stuff. but I think I get where you're coming from.
Yeah, I do both, right? I do both. I look for high potential when I'm looking for someone that I just need the horsepower and we just need to get somebody trained up and go. But then, as I go into newer organizations, I tend to dip back into the well and go back to the people that I know and be like, hey, I might have a role for you. Do you want to come join the organization? So it's a two, like I invested in these folks. I want them to continue with me if I can, because I know them. And we love each other, and I want to work with them again.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Allie. Awesome insights. Let's transition to Sujoy. Sujoy, dive on in.
All right. Well, great insights. We can just go to the previous slide for a second. So great insights, Darren and Ali. Darren, you pulled off a really amazing org restructure of sorts, and that's so difficult to do. And that's just kudos to you. And Ali, I think building a team from the ground up, and like you said, training the team to be consultants, that's a great way to put it. And that ethos of we are here to solve problems. I think it's great. So thanks for sharing that. All right, so I'm going to share some slides and some information on how you can sort of build your dream team. And now we can move on to the next slide, please. And if you only have 30 seconds, everything you need to know is on the slide. So if you want to get the right people on the bus, you need to recruit like a marketer. And what that means is think about applying marketing concepts towards building your dream team. If you have a few more minutes, then I'm going to walk you through some ideas on how to do that. But that was your big takeaway here. Think like a marketer, use those marketing principles towards building your team, because the dream team that you're trying to chase are very much like consumers or customers that you're going after. The same principles definitely do apply. All right, so from here, we'll try to look at what are some of these ideas and thoughts, so we can move on to the next slide. So the first tip is to craft a plan. No big deal here. If you think a good team is critical to your success, then you should allocate resources like you mean it. So my sort of rule of thumb is allocate about 10 hours for every open role if you're the hiring manager. You will likely need the support of various other team members, whether it's HR, talent acquisition, recruiters, internal and external, your peers, folks on their team. Planning that out ahead of time is really helpful, because you don't want this to be number 5 on your list of things to do when it actually is number 1. So planning it out, allocating time, and then also allocating budget. We're all in a very, very tight labor market. We've all seen the impact of that. So if you want to make sure that you are managing your G&A budget and you're thinking about hiring multiple positions, thinking about retention, maybe retention bonuses, planning that out ahead of time is going to be really key. So step 1, make sure that you're thinking ahead, planning your time, your resources, budgeting, and that will really help you, set the right foundation. So moving on to the next one. The idea of any marketer is to think about optimizing your sources. So your sources of customers, traffic, volume, and this is no different. So you probably have a few different sources that you're using to get your candidates in. They may look like the following. So online applications, LinkedIn, referrals into your organization, external recruiters. Rule of thumb, this generally tends to be what I've seen. So you get high volume in some of these, but very low conversion rates, and it flips as you look at these sources. So your goal here is to optimize your different sources and think about which ones tend to work for you. In my opinion, I think referrals tend to be underutilized source. They have really high conversion rates. These are folks that have been recommended to your organization from folks within your organization. Maybe they are vendors, other partners. So they have a vested interest in your success. And it makes a lot of sense for you to think about optimizing this source and others that work for you. The other sort of big idea here is that you need to be recruiting all year long. Even if you don't have any open positions right now available for you. much like brand building. You have a brand building budget that you use to build your pipeline and build your funnel. The same idea applies here. Think about what sort of message you want to communicate out into the audience about your company as a place to work. Why should that be their next destination? So step 2 in our journey of thinking as a marketer towards recruiting is to really optimize these sources and build that pipeline. Moving on. Now that you have a pipeline, you want to make sure that they get a good experience, just like you would want your customers that pick up the phone and call you, or go to your website or to a store. You want them to have a great experience. So the idea here is think of the first thing that any candidate recognizes from your organization. It's the job description. Your first contact is that job description. So how might you look at that job description a little bit differently? Most job descriptions tend to have a lot of information. I've seen one that had about 7 pages of information and skills and requirements. What you want to do is make sure that you think like a copywriter. So this quote by Leo Burnett really resonates with me. Make it simple, make it memorable, make it inviting to look at, make it fun to read. We wouldn't think of a job description as something that fits the bill here, but that's perhaps what you need to do to really stand out. So a solid job description that looks really inviting and engaging. And you want to make sure that not just a job description, but other aspects of your application process really move that target applicant forward. So the keyword here is a target applicant. You want to make sure that if someone isn't the right fit, it's pretty clear that they're not the right fit. This saves them time, and of course, it saves you time as well. So the big idea here is make sure that you think of your application process for your potential candidates just like you would your product or a customer's journey. This is also a journey that your candidates are going to go through, and you want to optimize it the best you can. All right, we can move on to the next one. So now you've got these candidates. How do you want to apply data? And we all like to crunch data. If we are in marketing, it's all about data. So how should you do this? In my opinion, you want to make sure that you have about 3 to 4 interviewers, not more than that. It tends to really elongate the process, adds confusion. So if you are able to, I would suggest limiting the interviewer panel to about 3 to 4. That should give you enough insights that you need to make your decision. If you are a people manager at HR, I've seen a lot of roles where HR is not involved, and you want to make sure that you make that happen. So you want an HR professional to be involved in any sort of people manager role, and maybe others too, but definitely for people manager roles. You want to make sure that you have a scoring method ahead of time. So those 3 to 4 interviewers, get them together, sit down and discuss what you would consider to be a gold star candidate. So I have some examples at the bottom. You may think about soft skills and hard skills, and it's important for you to define what you consider to be the best of the breed. So what would a great candidate look like? And you want to make that as objective as possible to avoid bias. We all have biases of various sorts, and being objective about who is the right and the best candidate for a role really eliminates those to some degree. They will always exist, but this can really help. The other thing that you want to do is make sure that you are really mimicking real life. So some candidates really present themselves well, they speak really well, but they might not do really well on the job. So you want to make sure that your approach here is really mimicking real life. One way to do that is to use things like case interviews. Some of you may be familiar with that. If you're looking to hire a strategic role, you want to make sure that you understand the person's ability to handle ambiguous situations. One example of that could be ask a question like, our conversion rates are declining. What might be the reason for that, and how would you solve it? This is a very ambiguous question, and it requires someone to really apply problem solving and critical thinking skills in a very stressful environment of an interview, which is also like real life. So having case interviews I found to be really helpful, especially for strategic roles. Flipping over to the technical side, technical assessments, there are multiple sites out there that can help you gauge someone's technical skills. And these are really good for hands-on roles where someone is required to complete certain tasks and they need technical skills. What we found useful is to really develop in-house simple assignments that someone can complete within maybe an hour or two. This helps us control exactly the way what we're assessing for and the experience. So we tend not to rely on external sites, but we develop our own assessments. And we know, of course, what that might involve, what types of responses we might get, and how to grade them. So this is the approach that I've seen works with assessing candidates. It's really important in today's day and age to make sure you are able to assess someone quickly versus have rounds and rounds of interviews. We've heard of these stories of creating these presentations and these assignments that candidates get. Not a huge fan of those. There are better ways to assess how good or poorly someone might perform on the job, and this might be one way for you to do that. And finally, the next slide, please. Always be closing. So don't ghost candidates. It might come back to haunt you. When you find a good candidate, I think the tendency is to look for, who else might be good and compare and contrast. I think what you want to do is move quickly. If you find out a candidate, time is money. We've had situations where a candidate might be off the market by the time you get around to making them an offer. So you definitely want to make sure that you move fast. And if you find that someone is really good, but not perhaps the right fit for this particular role that you're considering them for, be creative about other opportunities. Never let a rock star go. I've learned that lesson a few times, and try to make sure that you keep this top talent. And that is pretty much it. Again, we are trying to apply the principles of marketing to getting the right folks into the organization. This is your number one priority as a leader, to build a strong team. If you build a strong team, the rest will flow from there. So hopefully you found this useful. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Super good. Thank you, Sujoy. I think what we'll do, please, if you have questions, everybody, and I see some comments and questions in the chat, let's use the chat. Let's keep collecting questions and comments. We'll bring that together in a few minutes so we can talk. But no, fabulous insights, and for our three experts, you're each covering different facets of this challenging exercise. So let's talk about, how do these dots connect? Can we move ahead, Dasha? Yeah, how do these dots connect to you guys' eyes, and what kind of common themes are we hearing? What are your thoughts?
I mean, I would say that we're all touching on, hiring the right people up front. And that's both from a technical perspective, culture fit, and like grit. That's one of the things that I look for. And I put that in my job descriptions when I'm hiring, that this is a job that takes someone that wants to dig in and have just some grit to them, right? Because it's not easy, and people get burnout really quickly. So these jobs are not meant for someone who, wants to work less than 40 hours a week. I don't know how nicely to put it, but it's not a cush job, right? So you want to make sure those people have that digging in skill.
I think a lot of this goes back to your business strategy. So as you think about your business strategy, your strategy may be to hire the best of the best. So, we're all hearing about Netflix and some of their perhaps missteps. But Netflix was famous for really paying above market. And that was their approach. I think that doesn't have to be everyone's approach. You can build your business strategy based on your ability to take people with the right attitude and then train them for aptitude. And that may be a very viable business strategy. So I think it all depends on how you place yourself in the market, where you see your current position, and how you want to take yourself to the vision that I think Darren talked about as well. So I would say a lot of this depends on how you're thinking about your market position and how you're approaching your people resources and your strategy there.
Fabulous. Aaron, any immediate reactions?
Yeah, I think that the third one, I think we've all touched on to greater or lesser extent, is the constant training and upskilling, both to make sure the teams have got the capability to deliver what we're asking, but also an ongoing career progression and motivation, that ongoing support to help them train and keep abreast of latest thinking is, I think, key for both the organisation to make sure we get the most out of people, and for the people themselves for their continual development as well.
Great point.
I would add to that.
Let's add a thing here. So Dasha, where it says hire the best of the best, let's add, I think I heard Sujay say, or hire for high horsepower and then invest in equipping. I think there's multiple strategies there that can work effectively.
Yeah, I think
I like what
you
he said about hire for attitude. If you think the aptitude is there, there was the phrase you said there that was catchy.
Yeah. I think that's the. You can use any of these approaches depending on what what's important to you as a business, and you could go out there and pay someone top dollar and get the cream of the crop, or you could say, I'm going to invest in like Ali mentioned, really good processes, solid training, a great culture. And I'm going to attract people that are drawn to the mission and are not just motivated by the biggest paycheck. But those are approaches that you can use. And I personally look for folks that have the right attitude, because I think a lot of what we do can be trained. If you have a passion for your business, consumers, solving their problems, a lot of the technical aspects can be learned if you have an aptitude for it. So yeah, that was the point.
I also think just go with your gut. Like, there are times when maybe the choices I made didn't seem to make sense to everyone else, but I just knew that they would be the right person, or they would grow into the role the right way. There was an example when I was pulling off the BDR line at Rackspace. I had two of them interviewing with me, and one was so smart and probably really would be a really technically proficient person, but she was just a little bit cold and not engaging, versus someone else who was really warm and welcomed people when they came to talk to her about anything. Maybe she wouldn't have been as quick to catch on, but I knew that we needed someone that the marketing team felt comfortable coming to and engaging with and being friends with in order to gain that trust. And so I hired the person that everybody was like, I just think this other person would be better. And I was like, trust me, I need someone to be like the face of the team and really, warm people up. And it worked out great.
Something else.
Awesome. One other. Go ahead, Darren.
Yeah, I was just saying another thing I thought we haven't really touched on, but it's something I've considered on multiple occasions. Is the idea of how open do you make the platform, and in terms of who's got access to it and what do you allow them to do. So that idea, obviously, it's not that difficult for anyone to build an email, but what governance and what processes do you put in place? So it's kind of that idea of, do you have a center of excellence with widely distributed users, whether that's globally, locally, whatever, or do you try and lock down and have kind of an expert team, but then after that then places demands that team's got to be quite sizable. So in conclusion, my usual approach is trying to put in place the right governance and process that allows more people to get more leverage out of the tools and systems that you've got access to.
Great points. What I was going to highlight, I think I've heard each of you speak to an investment, and a significant one that needs to be made. So maybe the comment here would be, plan on a significant investment. Sujoy, I heard you talk about the amount of time and thought and care that needs to go into the hiring process. Ali, you've talked about training, equipping, acculturating, investing a lot of energy in culture. Darren, you've talked about similar things as well as process, having a well thought out design, which has its own needs, like getting an organizational design or a process design put together is one thing. Getting a full team acculturated and making it work is a big investment. So tell me if I'm reading you guys wrong, but I think I'm taking away plan on a pretty significant investment, and maybe in multiple dimensions to really get this to work.
Absolutely. I mean, I often wonder when I walk into these companies that haven't established a real operations team, how they've gotten as successful as they have. And I think a lot of it is like tenacity in sales and accident a lot of times, versus if you had the right foundation to start with and you just thought operationally from the beginning, how much easier it would be to get to this, to hit your growth patterns or even accelerate growth or get into that high growth mode that every tech company dreams of, right? Imagine if from the beginning you establish these great processes, the, tool set, a smart team in place, and those were your first hires versus, a big content team or, whatever the other pieces of marketing that are equally as important but not foundational. I often think that, like, especially when you're walking into some of these startups or, a lot of folks will take their next step after being in an organization for a while, going to a startup to try to like build from scratch because it feels like it's a good place to be. And I tell anybody that I talk to from a startup, any CEO that's like trying to figure out how to create their marketing team, I'm like, start with your ops team. That they're going to lay your foundations for growth. Everyone else can be outsourced for the most part. Product marketing, operations cannot be.
Good points. Let's move ahead a slide or two, Dasha. Just for the sake of time, I'd like to kind of finish connecting a few dots here, and we do have some closing content to share. I think at the end of the session, for anybody who'd like to stay on, we'll kind of open up for broader questions and open up the mics to have a deeper running conversation. And what's the slide after this one, Dasha?
Yep.
Let's talk about visions. So based on the work you guys have done and based on the change that's always happening in the marketing ops and marketing tech realm, how do you see things evolving and advancing, either within your organization or in the broader sense? What are your thoughts in terms of where things are moving toward in the future?
Great question. First thought that springs to mind, but it's focused purely on technology, and is the idea that, like in any other field, how much AI will help and support what we do in marketing. So even looking, we use Salesforce and looking at what Salesforce Einstein can deliver in terms of adding richer data using machine learning rather than trying to increase your team constantly to do all the data analysis and figure all of that out and feed into new nurture streams and new nurture tracks, is if you can actually automate that based on intelligence, then I think that, and that's certainly obviously we see that happening in across a number of platforms now, not just in Salesforce, that there's the increased use of artificial intelligence. I think that's one key area that could help all of us in terms of doing more with less.
I think the other huge looming thing is with increased data security and data privacy laws, how do we continue marketing the same way we do? We might have to move into a cookieless world. What does that mean? That's the one thing that, like, keeps me up at night a little bit, right? Because all of the foundations of what we do in marketing, in digital marketing, come from, you know, cookie tracking and watching behaviors of people, to understand when they're ready to buy or when they're engaging with your content, or you know, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's going to be a very interesting time, watching how all of the privacy issues that we have around the internet affect the way we do marketing.
I think that's certainly for the moment. So I think for sure, I only thought that obviously there's no simple solution, but I think there are lots of benefits to moving more towards kind of a first party cookie world, in terms of having it obviously brings some limitations, but it brings some advantages as well. But as you say, that's something that we all need to figure out and see what the future looks like in that world.
Yes.
I think the spend on technology within marketing organizations versus the spend on people is probably already biased towards technology, or maybe it will be in the short term. So I think what's important for marketing teams is to figure out, one, how to utilize this technology better. I would guess that we are only using maybe 30 to 40% of what's available to us today. So in this future where we're spending more on technology than people, what does that look like, and how do you make sure that you're getting the most for that investment? And then on the people side, if people are a smaller part of your spend, you want to make sure that you get the right folks on board, and that's then the whole conversation today. But I think this problem will only will only increase in its severity. So that's going to be part of that evolution. In terms of the sort of attribution and cookies, I think we'll see a lot more reliance on zero-party and first-party data. The walled gardens will, the walls will maybe get higher, and maybe there will be fewer of them. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see how you deliver, a solid consumer experience with what data you have. And privacy might, in some segments of the audience or the consumers or customers, it might become a bigger issue, and in others it might not. It's kind of interesting how there are segments where privacy is not such a huge concern, but in others it's paramount. So I think there's going to be interesting times ahead.
I think, yeah, I completely agree, Sujay. And then just one probably obvious one to throw in the mix, but is I believe the increased focus on ABM versus more traditional lead gen approaches is only going to advance as everyone sees the high return from ABM activities versus what's gone before, which would be probably a separate topic entirely as to what's the difference between ABM and just smart marketing. But I think there's quite a considerable difference in that. So I think that the continued focus on ABM is only going to increase.
100%. I could talk about ABM for hours with people.
That's a separate call we could jump on together.
Whole different topic. Looks like we have a question maybe on tools assessment. What are the considerations we take into account? And customization. Oh, I am not a fan of customization because I've been on the other side where I had to rip all of that out. My personal philosophy is to keep it as simple as possible and to try to use the functionality the way it's meant to be used. There's always some customizations that have to happen, but keep that less. Like the least amount of Apex code in a Salesforce instance, the better. But I think for tools assessment, it really depends on the strategy of the marketing team and what they're trying to achieve. Are you in an organization that has transactions on their website, meaning, it's a maybe you're targeting SMB customers and you have a trial that you're trying to take. And so it's a very self-serving, not self-serving, but self-help. I forget I'm trying to think of a word that I can't think of. It's still early. but essentially the buyer can buy right then, versus something that's enterprise level where you have a whole buying committee that you're looking at and need to be very prescriptive and educational about it. And it's very much a sales assisted process. Like those two cases right there, that's different tech stacks. One probably needs an ABM tool at some point. One probably never will. So thinking in terms like that and really understanding the kind of marketing and the kind of marketing motion and the sales motion you have should be dictating what tools you're purchasing.
Good points. For the sake of time, everybody, I'd like to shift to some closing content, and then, like I said, let's keep the chat open and the mics open at the end for additional questions. One comment I'd just like to put in here is, I think a theme I'm hearing is that, not only has the tech been changing and the data changing and the tools changing, but in terms of looking into the future, we should expect continuing change, sometimes evolutionary, sometimes bigger. Going to a cookieless world could be a much, much bigger change. So moving to a fully AI-enabled world is already afoot, and there's points where that could be more radical. So it comes back to building an A-grade marketing team and sustaining it, having just the raw talent, my word, bright lights, on the team, well-equipped, well-acculturated, and with the right level of grit, I'll borrow your word, Allie, and resiliency. I just kind of, out of what you guys are sharing, it just jumps out at me, the importance of that. It's always going to keep changing. Better have an organization that's adept at dealing with it.
Yep.
I'm going to take a few minutes and do some, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Rich. Sorry.
I was going to, let's do a few closing comments and then hang on to the thought, Allie. We'll open up the dialogue again in just a moment. Dasha, would you like to share the kind of upcoming items?
All right. So for our upcoming Martechify plans, we have another session that is set for September 29th. The topic is going to be the content automation, leveraging Martech for next level content personalization. There's an RSVP that will link that will be available or is available. So if you want to go ahead and sign up, mark your calendars and save the date, I think that would be great. And then looking ahead into November, a few months away, we're looking to have a topic of Martech stack evolution and the latest trends, and that will be on the date of November 10th, right before the holidays. So those are some of our upcoming Martechify plans that we hope to see everyone visiting us and being part of the discussion.
And we are always looking for interest in what topics are good for you guys and what you would love to hear about. So if ABM, it was brought up earlier, so I threw that one out there too, that, we could always add that to the list in one of the upcoming sessions. So you guys definitely let us know if ABM is a topic of interest.
And Laura, that might kind of lead into some deep dives. If you and your marketing team want to discuss a topic in greater detail with us, ask us about setting up a custom deep dive session where we can bring experts to the discussion and topic of your choosing. Some that we're looking to target for September is Martech Platform Bootcamp, a hands-on intro for newcomers. And then also looking ahead, we have thoughts of cloud data technologies, introduction to major cloud-based data tools. So we would love to be a part of that at your request. So, and I don't know if Rich wants to expand on any of that or.
Yeah, I will. So we're going to plan on hosting an open. So there is such a thing as a custom boot camp or a custom deep dive session. But these two events on the chart here are open events. So, but envision the deep dives. Whereas our forums are about an hour and a half and involve a fairly large audience, the deep dives will be a smaller group, more specialized, and may break out into multiple sessions where the topic will run deeper. Like the platform boot camp, the first time we executed that, it was a 3-part series for people wanting to either getting in the first place, or maybe somebody who has specific skills in one direction that wants to broaden skills. So anyhow, I strongly encourage, come to the website. The website has all the recorded sessions. It'll have this recorded session here shortly. There's places where you can go in and make your recommendations as to future content. And there's quite a trove, and there's a whole set of articles and content items surrounding the forum events. So come to martechify.com and or reach out to any of us directly if you have additional ideas. Those are always welcome. Well, thank you, everybody. I know we're going to start losing people in a few minutes, those who have hard stops at the hour, but let's kind of reopen the dialogue here. Alex, I think you had a thought. And Dasha, if we can open up the mic, so to speak, let's see if there's additional questions.
I forgot what my thought was. It was probably just reiterating something you said.
I was just talking about resiliency and grit, and expecting change, designing for change, anticipating evolution. Boy, in our experience, it's massively important.
Yeah, I think adaptability is probably the biggest attribute that you need to have in a role like this, because you're constantly doing, the bob and weave. There's always something being thrown at you while you're trying to walk the line and have your roadmap and your plan ahead. But then there's always, something else that needs to get done on top of that. So being able to think and move swiftly and change courses when need to is really important.
There's another just comment I'd put out there to stir the pot. Developing a learning culture. How do you kind of foster a culture where learning's encouraged, learning's widely available, and kind of get it into the culture, into the wiring of the organization? It's its own subject.
Good question. Before we get said where we are working today, there is the idea of we call Think Wednesday or No Meeting Wednesday, where that is meant to. It's just one way of trying to create that space for people to take a step back and think about how to do more learning. In honesty, like everything else, it's a great idea. It doesn't always come off because people will allow their time to be taken still with meetings. But as a principle, I think it's a good idea and a good thought to say, how can you carve some time out for the organization to take that step back and do the learning and just do something that's going to support them longer term than just focusing on the day-to-day.
Yeah. Good.
I think it's ultimately.
Well, we are at the hour here. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's ultimately about value generation, whether it's for your team, for your customers, your consumers. If you're driven by that as your North Star, I think you will you will not go wrong. So yeah, sorry, that was my quick point.
No, great point. Well, hey, I want to respect everybody's time here. Thank you again, experts. Fabulous insights today. Boy, I think we got some just powerful thinking out in the open. So much appreciation. I appreciate the time investment you made and all the insights that you brought. And thanks again to everybody who's joined. We hope to see you at future events.
Thanks for organizing.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day.